Welcome everyone to our second Verimpact Academy Alumni Club webinar. We're very excited for the Verimpact Academy Club and the journey we have embarked on. The Verimpact Academy Alumni Club aims to provide a platform for networking, professional development with guest lectures and webinars and social interaction online and in person. And we believe that this new initiative will further strengthen the bonds among our alumni spanning different continents and countries. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Arab Hoballah. Mr. Arab Hoballah has an extensive career focused on sustainable consumption and production. He currently serves as Senior SCP expert for the EU Switch Asia Pacific Program and Executive Director of the Seed Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Development. He previously led the EU Switch Asia SCP facility and served as Executive Director of Seed, as well as holding positions as Senior Sustainability Expert. Before that, he spent over a decade as Chief of SPC in UNEP, where he played a key role in mainstreaming resource efficiency and SPC policies globally, notably contributing to the development of the 10-year framework of programs in SPC. Prior to his work with UNEP, he contributed to the UNEP Regional Seas Program, focusing on sustainable development and coastal area management in the Mediterranean region. Today, Mr. Arab Hoballah will speak about COP28 and beyond. And with no further ado, we have our very own Senior Sustainability Advisor at Verimpact, Mr. Spiros Koubelis, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Marina, and thank you for having me with this starting first few minutes of this webinar. I have to say that I'm very happy that with our Verimpact Academy Alumni Club, we are now already in our second such webinars. I believe that it is very important, since we can have access to speakers of the caliber of Arab Hoballah and other speakers that have already been with us and will follow, to share with our alumni. Our aim is not only to provide knowledge and support for sustainability and ESG, but also to help everyone embark on the proper process of incorporating sustainability in what they do. And today I'm particularly happy to welcome Arab. I just call him by his first name because we've known each other for a number of years. As you mentioned before, Arab has done a lot of things, but I would just stick to three of them, which I consider very important. Not that everything else is not important, but let me just say for the history that Arab was the person in the United Nations Environment Program Mediterranean map, the person that actually established a thing that was a very innovative thing at the time. He established the Mediterranean Sustainable Committee, Sustainable Development Committee, the MCSD, which for the first time, also in the history, I think, of the UN, brought together government and non-government partners and stakeholders speaking at an equal footing and driving the sustainability agenda way before a lot of people actually understood what we're talking about when we talk about sustainability or the SDGs and so on. So he was really one of the mavericks and the people that started this whole discussion for sustainability and in our own Mediterranean. Now, same thing for the SCP that you mentioned, and for those that are not familiar, this means sustainable consumption and production. Not many people know, but all of the work that UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, is doing on sustainable consumption and production and circularity is actually thanks to Arab. While he was based in Paris and in many other positions, he was the father of the policies that the United Nations Environment Program established for that. So, you know, this is not a small thing to have added to the global discussion. And of course, the third thing that I wanted to mention is the work that he's currently doing with Seed, because this is not policy, this is different. He's supporting small and medium, but mostly small companies to really turn their operation into what is sustainable consumption and production, to what is circularity, and be viable businesses out of that. And as we have said in many opportunities, the work that small companies can do in driving this process is huge. So I don't think I need to say much more. I know that Arab is very dynamic when he comes to actually reaching the objectives for, combating climate change and so on. We saw each other while he was at COP28. and I know that he has a lot to share with us, so I will not steal any more of his time. But after he's finished with his presentation, we'll be able to have a discussion. And for those attending this webinar, please prepare your questions if you have, because you will be allowed to ask Arab some questions. With that, I'm stopping and I'm giving the floor back to, I think, Arab now, or to you, Marina, I don't know. To Arab. So, Arab, please.
I think
Okay,
Arab, yeah.
thank you very much. After such a privileged introduction, I don't know what to say. I mean, you put a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. I hope that I will be doing things that will be satisfactory for the audience. So thank you, Spiros. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Marina. And I will try to move ahead and, in fact, reflecting throughout my presentation on the element that you mentioned when it comes to sustainability, sustainable consumption and production. And I will end up my presentation beyond COP28 on why SCP remains the bottom line. I hope I will be able to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint just to make sure that we can move ahead with that. Did you get it?
Yes.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So, dear alumni of Verimpact, I like very much the word impact because this is exactly what we are missing in most of the work we have been doing in the UN. A lot of declaration, a lot of convention, a lot of political decisions. Some problems with the implementation, just to be polite, but then the impact has been always the challenge for us to see how we can effectively see and measure the impact. So I'm glad that Christina, Spiros, Marina has been working on this very important issue in helping the enterprises and others to measure the impact of what they are doing. COP28. COP28, that when they started with it, from the first time they decided that it will be held in United Arab Emirates, we have seen a lot of criticism and doubts all around from mainly Western media, but others also, on why COP28 in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, how this could be possible from a country that is a big producer of fossil fuels, and all the more chaired by the CEO of ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. So all these doubts until the day before the COP28 was launched were high on the media. And I would say I would also one of them, wondering on how they will be delivering on something positive, mainly when you see after Sharm el-Sheikh, where the Saudis were very active, I mean, Saudi companies and other oil companies very active in the corridors. And the same will happen in Azerbaijan in COP29. So for the people who are very skeptic about this and know the important role of the oil companies, you would say, okay, what can we achieve from Sharm el-Sheikh, United Arab Emirates, and then Azerbaijan when it comes to climate change? Surprisingly, it delivered at Dubai reasonably good output, a surprise for almost everybody. It's not enough, for sure not enough, but it is more than what anyone had expected as a come out from Dubai COP28. So it has been a good step forward, bringing in certain number of elements that were hanging there. Nobody knew how to really put them in the agenda, and they managed to put them. They started, and this has been like the cherry on the cake, starting in the beginning and having a new fund that has been announced on the first day to address the loss and damages. Of course, not as much as we expected, but it was a good start. People start smiling, and I was among them there and so on. And it concluded with the first international agreement that had a reference to fossil fuels, because this is the elephant in the room, but nobody knew how to put it in the agenda. And in this meeting, and would say, thanks to, when you look at the formulation, thanks to the small island developing state in the Pacific, they managed to get the right expression in order to get the fossil fuels put there. Now, this right sentence is well framed in what they call now the United Arab Emirates consensus, which called, and I will take it word by word because every word, including the comma, is important, transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, accelerating action in this critical decade so as to achieve net zero by 2050. So you have two scales of timing, carefully looking at the transition. So it cannot be done overnight. It takes time. You have to go step by step. So it's a rapid one because we're looking for something in this decade, which means we still have only 5-6 years left to show something, looking forward to this net zero carbon future in 2050. Of course, now we need to implement that. So, and considering the different national circumstances, it has been well understood and properly framed there that every nation must be part of the transition, knowing that not all the nation will be doing it at the same path in the same way. And as we used to say in the UN language, common, shared, common but differentiated responsibility. So they all agree on something common, something that they will share as an objective, but they will have differentiated responsibilities because they are not at the same level of development. They are not all producers, and so on and so forth. So these elements are extremely important when we will come to implementing the outcome of this conference, as well as others. I will list few of the outcomes, and then I will refer to 3 that were, from my perspective, innovative and outstanding. The first one here are the call for tripling renewable energy capacity. There has been many agreements before that for the last 10 years or more on looking how to really increase renewable energy, how to improve energy efficiency. It has been put there clearly that we need to triple the renewable energy capacity, which for someone who knows the global system when it comes to solar and other renewable energy possibilities, tripling it is not such a big deal. It just needs to be done properly. The other one where I would have expected more is doubling the average annual rate of energy efficiency. In fact, energy efficiency, we can triple, quadruple it if we want to be serious, but this comes to, I will refer to it later on, to our consumption and production patterns, which remain and are increasingly unsustainable, unfortunately. Then we have looking, of course, at the coal power. Many industrial countries rely on that, how we can phase down the unabated coal power, accelerating effort to net zero energy system, the thing more about the whole context of that, transitioning away, I said, step by step, it takes time, from fossil fuel and energy systems, phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. You all know, and when you look at the verification, impact measurement, we have always had this issue of subsidies. And this has been very delicate in all the sustainability discussion issues, how to stop the inefficient subsidies, not only for fossil fuels in many things, but particularly in fossil fuels. We know that all the fossil fuel that we have, the one that we use for our cars, more in certain countries than others, lot of subsidies there. And this is preventing really the countries and the people to take the right action, because those subsidies are not necessarily addressing poverty and just transition. And you can go to developing countries producing fossil fuels, and you will see that it doesn't trickle down to proper development in those countries. And there where we have a big problem. And they're calling all the parties to contribute, as I say, nationally to those global efforts, each one according to their condition. What next for that? This is the main element on this presentation. First, move from the decision to reality. We have had outstanding outcome in this COP28. We still need to translate it into action. And as we say, the devil is into the details on how we will be implementing it. One element that has been highlighted a lot there is look at the NDC, the nationally determined contribution to climate change. Each country is working on that. And in 2025, which is the first period of reporting properly, they are requested to put stronger targets there in different sectors. Would it be in the food system? I'll come to it, in fossil fuels and so on. Finance, this is where we come to the first decision on the fund on loss and damages. And beyond that, the finance for effective energy transition in developing countries that requires really substantive financial resources, much more than has been put on the table. But the funds exist. It's the matter of how to reorganize it, which will require ultimately a higher and sincere and responsible political collective action and efficiency at high scale. We need, as I said, energy efficiency, resource efficiency in general. We can more than double it just today, each and every one of us. What about when you look at the city or at the government? And there has been regular calls everywhere for international agreement, bringing people working together. This is not a novelty for COP28. It's progressing, but far too slowly to really have an impact. And unfortunately, and it remains the case, the national interest in almost each and every country comes before the common good. Even in Europe, which is the most advanced region in the world when it comes to sustainability principles and implementing them as much as possible, national interest still is first. The loss and damage fund, which has been an important one and a lot of discussion before the meeting itself. As I said, operationalized on the first day, big surprise to help the climate vulnerable countries. Of course, when you look at the amount, 700 million. Yeah, but 700 million as a stop. The start one remains a drop in the ocean of the needs, which is beyond 500 billion. So it's like, I will call it the price of a coffee when it comes to look at the needs of the countries there. But let us remain a little bit optimistic, which is not naturally my nature now, that people will come and step slowly to see from Dubai how you go then to Azerbaijan, to Baku, and do things better, and convince the other partners, we'll come to that later, that they will also have to contribute financially. So next is how to properly operationalize it, because we have not put the mechanics already there, and how to increase substantially the resources from the drop of 700 million to hundreds of billions. And you know that we have had all this coming up for sustainability agenda, where we're talking at Rio plus 20 at 100 billion, and we are not yet there. But when we had COVID, the countries has been able to put more than 100 billion on the table. So when there are emergencies, they do it. When this long-term process, we tend to slowly think about national interest, common interest, and so on. And this is, in terms of reporting, is something that we need to keep in mind. And an issue from my perspective is that we expect that this fund to be hosted and managed by the World Bank. I'm not sure this is the best option. We might need something innovative, because if we have to manage this fund business as usual, when you look at the challenge of climate change, we might have some doubt on how it will be effectively operationalized. But let us see. Meanwhile, the country needs are growing because the middle class is growing. They need more foil. There will be more car. There will be more building that will need more energy. So we are running in development while we are worried about this energy and climate issues. And the next round of NDCs will really have to come with the needed details for that. Among the issues that were also well integrated in COP28, and really these are what I call outstanding new elements, is the food system. How much FAO and other food food international organizations were contributing to that. And it created at COP28 a real milestone, because food, which is essential and which is very much linked to climate, would it be mitigation or adaptation, has been left out of climate change discussion. There has been a good declaration, good discussion, commitment from the countries, and looking really at the nexus between food, agriculture, and climate within the negotiation. Of course, this has been discussed in other forums and so on, but putting it in the context of a COP meeting is innovative, and it can have a certain impact in the near future. People will be now asked to integrate elements related to food systems into the next round of NDCs, but this will require serious policy reform because it is very much linked to consumption and production patterns. And they are expected to show progress in the next 2 rounds of COP and beyond. Interestingly, in this declaration on food system, there has been a very clear reference on the expectation from the companies, the farmers, and other civil society. And this is one of the other elements that came out from COP28, on which I will refer later on. The other innovative issue was the role of the cities. You always had mayors, head of collective communities running around, discussing, involved inside events and so on. But at COP28, there has been a specific climate action summit within COP that brought a large number of mayors who have been discussing about the role of cities in climate action. Now, I don't know how much you are aware about the importance of cities, but in our increasingly urbanized world, we cannot really deal with climate change issues just at the government level. The right level is the city. The right level, the right battleground for climate change and resource efficiency is at city level. So we need to see how to work better with them. Most of the emissions are coming out from the cities. And resource efficiency is first at city level. For those who have been following the COP meetings, the fourth IPCC report, I'm talking about 2006, have identified very clearly that the low-hanging fruit for climate mitigation is energy efficiency in the building sector. You might look around you in the buildings, wherever you are in Athens, in Greece, in Oman, in other cities, you can look around. Most of the buildings are inefficiently built, not really energy efficient, because we don't have the right regulation and we don't have the right reporting systems coming back to the focus of your work, how to get to the impact. Next is to get the right financing on urban infrastructure with the right procurement system for that. Reconsider the design of the cities, or at least the existing cities, how to improve them, looking at living conditions and really more ambitions related to the cities in the NDCs. The third innovative element after the food, the cities, are the other stakeholders, what we call the non-party stakeholders, because the only party are the member states. We have been considering increasingly, and it has been highlighted at COP28, the role of the business. The role of the business when it comes to climate adaptation and mitigation, positively, negatively, and so on. So it's clear now, and many companies did accept that, did commit to that. Will they will implement? This is another story. So we cannot really talk about decarbonization if we don't bring first the big companies, the large one that we know all around, that have a hand with all the resources on how they can make an improvement, industries, investors, and so on to scale up. But we cannot do it without the small and medium enterprises, which at the end of the day are the bottom of the structure of any economic system in any country, whether it is the poorest developing country or the rich developed countries. They all rely on a strong network and structure of small and medium enterprises, which constitute between 80 and 90% of the industries in the countries. So throughout all the discussion, not only at COP, but at international conferences on sustainable development, the UN, and so on, the elephant in the room, which are the small and medium enterprises, have been absent. To the extent that the OECD about a year ago issued a report that say the title is very clearly, "No net zero without SMEs." I mean, it cannot be clearer than that. But as a couple of ministers have been telling me in discussions, you know, the SMEs are too many, too diverse. We don't know how to work with them. We need to find a way to work with them. And I hope that in your reporting and when looking at the impact, you can always question, where are the SMEs? Let me come to some elements now just regarding SCP, which is, I mean, something that I favored since I started working on that since 85, 86, before the topic was put on the agenda. Very clearly, when you look at the sustainability agenda, how are we really moving on sustainability? You listen to companies, to governments saying, oh, yes, we are on the path on sustainability. We are moving effectively on circularity, and the EU is very much advanced on that. But all in all, it becomes a nice cover, a shell, but the content, we are not yet there. So we are more in the fake news, greenwashing than effectively greening. I'm referring to scale. Of course, you have fantastic individual cases, but the scale, we are not there. So the transformative change is still weak beside the announcement. The appetite of growth is growing. And since we are all in one boat, even if Europe tomorrow becomes net zero, if they don't help induce, collaborated with Asia, with Africa to become more resource efficient, the boat will be sinking. So we have to be very careful when it comes to this common good there. So we still have a big gap from policies to real responsible action. But we do have good practices all around the world, in each and every village and city and country. When you look at the work of NGOs, local communities, small and medium enterprises, we have very innovative, brilliant, fantastic people doing that. But we are not moving as much as we need on that. So, and this will require a restructuring of the legal system, restructuring of the procurement system. This takes time. So unfortunately, since I have been working on this concept of sustainable consumption and production, there has been good progress, but compared to the needs, it remains a drop of the ocean. And 99%, we remain business as usual, including me, you, any one of us, when it comes to consumption and production patterns. Why that? When we fix a goal, we look at the network, there's always a gap somewhere. We don't have the right link from policies to effective action. Second, I'm thinking, looking at worldwide, we have a growing middle class coming in. We expect more than 2 billion additional middle class consumers from Asia and Africa. If those consumers rightly request to consume like a middle European, I'm not referring to an American, to a middle European, we simply don't have the resources on earth. So resource efficiency should not be only doubling, tripling, quadrupling. We have to move further. An element is, of course, when it comes to waste management, minimization, reuse, reconsider, remanufacture, and so on, the role of the small and medium enterprises, without neglecting, giving less importance to this fight. This fight between countries is there, will remain there, even if they shake hands, they give kisses, they always think of their common interest. But we can find what I call a common denominator to do certain things right. I will end up with 2 slides. This one is something that I had prepared looking at the different religions, the different beliefs, the different faith on how about climate change and sustainable consumption production. And I call it the power of habits, or the impact of habits. I will read it, I will not comment on that, just for you to keep in mind. The more we see without reaction, the more we support. Just look around you, look at your life, what we have been doing. The more we support, the more we tolerate, even if we know that it was wrong, but no problem, let's go and accept it, and so on. The more we tolerate, the more we accept. The more we accept, the more we approve. And the more we approve, the more difficult we change. And that's exactly where we are when it comes to our consumption patterns, to our unsustainable production patterns, and to the climate problem that we are facing today. Because we think, oh, yeah, we have seen, but no problem. Let us keep it. We'll see next, and so on. To be optimistic, and now it's very difficult to change. So switching to climate change, to sustainable consumption, production, and transitioning away from fossil fuels and really delivering circular economy. First, keep in mind that change, as I hope I demonstrated, will not come by force or by law. It's a mindset. And working on the mindset is an educational problem. Educational problem not only for the little children at school at 5 years old, which we should do, but also with the policymakers and the high-level decision makers. They need to get re-educated. They need to rebrain their mind in order to have this shift. There cannot be a serious impact without the small and medium enterprises and without changing our current unsustainable consumption and production patterns. And this is I took from Verimpact. Measure impact, drive change. Yes, but to measure impact, you need to see what are we talking about, what is before that, and what is coming that we are measuring it in order to drive change. So we have this issue of chicken and egg. Should we push the change in order to have the impact? Should the way you measure induce the people to make the change beforehand, downstream, upstream, and so on? And obviously, progress is impossible without change, and I will add without innovative and alternative approaches. So thank you very much.
That was so interesting. Thank you so much, Arab. I really appreciated all the points you raised, and I hope that the people that are now following this or will be watching it on our channels on YouTube and so on will have learned a few things. I will start, before I ask you a question, I will start by mentioning a little bit what you said about, the contradiction between the own interest or the direct, let's say, economic interest and the common interest, because this issue of climate change is something that we have been battling with for the last 30 years. And as you said, issues related, to not having enough regulation because it costs a lot to have more energy efficient buildings, or because subsidies are perverse in the way that they are put in energy and so on. And it reminded me of something that I read some time ago that actually I found it quite striking because I hadn't thought of that they were saying that if we fail to address climate change and we have to face the dire consequences if the global temperature rises beyond the 1.5 degrees that science has said should be the maximum we should allow, we will be the first and only species in history that will go extinct because it did not make financial sense to stay alive. which is crazy if you think of it. I mean, why did you die? Because of financial sense. So I think this is very important. Now, before I go to a couple of points, let's first explain to people that are listening to us when we say net zero. You know, not everybody knows the terminology, but I think that by explaining what net zero means, um, my take is that it means that what we put out there in terms of carbon and other emissions in the atmosphere, we need to take at least as much so that we remain at this net zero value. But if you have a better explanation than me, please feel free to say it.
I fully agree with you. The issue is when you look at it from the global perspective, you have many countries that will say we will be pushing for forestation in Africa. We will measure what we will be saving, and at the same time, we keep on polluting in our countries. This is also part of the equation, and this is not just. So for me, this is, we have also to make it, when we call about just a transition, not to take advantage of a certain position that we have in order to make sure that we can have planting trees elsewhere while we keep on polluting in our countries. And many countries are really abusing of this, this carbon credit issues and so on, which is part of the equation.
Exactly. And as you were saying, and I very much appreciated how you blended this whole discussion about climate change with the sustainable consumption and production, because at the end of the day, it is what we decide and want to do in our own livelihoods and the way that we do things. But let me take one step back. I said before, well, unfortunately, it's not a joke, but it's a funny way of putting it, that we will go extinct because of financial reasons. But you mentioned the importance of focusing on the science and the work that IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, as opposed to misinformation that we see through social media, through other things. And I think that the insistence that we need to put on focusing on the science is very important. We took a lot of delay to focus on the science, and we saw the results. And I think that science is now fully established. So would you like to comment on the importance and how difficult it is actually to get people to understand that, you know, we have to listen to the science and the numbers and the and those that know better than just general knowledge?
Okay. You know that among the UN organization, UNEP has been the one really focusing more on the need of science when it comes to climate change, environmental issues, and so on. The problem of science, I would say, like, I would not take any other subject, but you have, I would say, call it science and science. You have the science that brings you really with real facts on how we are evolving, and then you have the interpretation of it. In the interpretation, you have what I will call the counter science, when people come and try to demonstrate to you that no, in the next 5 years with the innovation, in the next 5 years we'll all be doing, all this will have changed and so on. And the big problem of climate change is that another science that looking at the cycles around the history is telling you, no, 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 but what's happening today is part of the cycle of the universe, which somehow is also science. But what they are not putting in their equation is that what happened in the last 200 years, from the Industrial Revolution and now the way we have been exploiting the resources, has been speeding up the pollution level, has been speeding up the extension of resources and so on, that was not there before. So if you don't put this in the equation, we have a big problem. But if you want to be an objective person and look carefully at the science, even if you look at different sources of that, you have enough to say that we're going on the wrong direction and what we need to do. But the problem comes to what you raised before, is about finance. We are going to extend because of finance. The problem with our global community and a certain number of countries, that they react only when you have the fire in the house, when you have the fire around you. If the fire is very far, no problem, we wait for it. And COVID has been extremely interesting for that. COVID is really a good example. If COVID would have remained, let us say, in few countries in Africa, and would not have reached the scale as it reached in Europe and United States, probably we would not have talked about it. Remember SARS, remember MERS. They were like localized somehow with limited impact. But when we have seen the impact which has been affecting the level of developed countries, then we found the resources. You know, it Spiros very well. The billions of dollars that were put on the table overnight, if we do the same today, we will stop all the diseases in Africa, we stop malaria, tuberculosis, we promote development and so on. So the issue is not that the money is not there. We do have the resources. We do have the resources to really implement sustainable development. We do have the resources to go and circular economy, which at the end of the day will increase the financial resources if we do it properly. The issue is that it takes time. Policymakers have mandate, and the private sector have their own interest, and the interest of the people in general is, I would say, far from their concerns. So our big problem is how can we have a common good? Exactly as if you remember, and it is coming back again in the international discussion, how can we bring back the sense of community where you have a common interest and you work for that? And there comes here again the issue of knowing about it, reporting about it, measuring the impact. When people sit together, and this is what I'm going to promote, for example, in the Pacific, I'm pushing for what we call the Talanoa dialogues. And in the Pacific, and they have done it for COP, which was born Fiji, they had this Talanoa dialogue. It means what? It means all people sit at the same level. There is no hierarchy in the discussion, open discussion, everyone expresses, we discuss, we have a consensus because it's of common interest, and we reach out to the smallest common denominator to move further. We are not yet able to do it, but that's the type of thing that we need.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with the points you raised. And I think that it is very important to understand that, as you said, if we have the decision and we want to move in the right direction, humanity can do it. Unfortunately, in the case of climate change, if we let things advance too far, then it is way more difficult to gain back the lost field. And in many cases, it will be impossible. But on this, there are two things that I wanted to bring your attention to. You mentioned food, and food is hugely important because we see that in many parts of the world, that if we want to provide food security, then we need to make sure that we have the right systems in place for this to happen. Because if we have increased droughts or increased floods, we saw the example in Greece with the floods that happened in the area of Thessaly, and a very big part of what we call the breadbasket of Greece has been flooded. And that is, of course, and it was officially signed as an effect of climate change. We see the same in other places. And I think that if we want to talk about the preparedness that we need to have for issues relating to climate change, then we have another word that is very much heard of, which is adaptation. And as you were saying, adaptation needs to be just in the way that it is done. It needs to take care of the most vulnerable, the less developed, the less rich in this sense. And then we have a number of things that we consider important. One is food security that you mentioned. The second thing is how we can actually use nature in itself to help us do things. There's this issue of discussion of nature-based solutions that can provide better ways than technical infrastructure in some ways, and we're not using enough of that. And then there is another elephant in the room, which is the probable effect of global immigration because of climate change. with all the secondary effects that it has in terms of peace and so on. So would you like to share a bit your thoughts about all this adaptation discussion and the side effects that we need to have some foresight before it is too late?
Yeah. It's almost too late now, but anyhow, let me come to your first element about food and to show how much we are not serious about the issue. You probably remember, I think it was in 2010, and unless I missed by 1 year, UNEP and FAO launched a program. It was at the time of the World Environment Day that was called Think, Eat, and Save. We demonstrated at that time that 1/3 of the food production is lost, 1/3 of the food consumed is wasted. So all in all, we have 1/3 of our food that is thrown away, while we're talking about people dying, whatever, and so on. Okay, I can understand it doesn't cross the borders very easily and so on. When you talk about food security in many countries is, first of all, a local issue. I mean, you need to secure a minimum of food at your level. Start by reducing the food losses, reducing the food waste, and then you have, if not the 1/3, you can have 20% more, which is not a negligible quantity. The second one, related to climate change. Food waste that goes to the landfill produce a lot of methane, which is even more complicated and more dangerous than CO2 emissions, and still keep on growing. I mean, I live in a reasonably middle-class good area in Athens. I'm not criticizing Athens. It could be anywhere the same. People don't have the sense properly of managing food waste. And we see how the beans come and collect them and so on, and you wonder, okay, I made an effort, but where is it going on? So people need to really start adapting properly to these climate conditions in order to see what I can do at home, what I can do at the city, what I can do in the restaurants, how can I adjust my farming system to reply to those new conditions and so on, in terms of less availability of water, of changing climate. So adapting it, and the issue is that we have the techniques for that. We know what to do. The big problem, what is very frustrating, is that we know exactly what we need to do, and we have the knowledge and the technology. What we don't have is the right will.
Let me interrupt you for a second on this food waste, because this is something that you and I have discussed many times, and now you provoked me to bring this issue up. When we talk about what we can do for addressing climate change, and part of that is also food waste and everything, it is important for everyone to think outside the box. Because when you say food waste, people will think, oh, you know, the big cruise ships or the hotels that waste food, or because we buy things and throw them away. You were the one who taught me and Christine actually a lesson when you moved into this region where you live in Athens. You were totally shocked by people that have fruit trees in their gardens and did not collect them. They just let them go to waste. This is food waste. This is food waste. And, you know, if you use the fruit that grows in your garden, that means that you need to buy a little bit less, which means that a little bit less needs to be transported, which is emissions, and a little bit less will go into fermentation and create CO2 and methane, as you say, and all that. So this is why it's important. I'm just giving it as an example of something I learned from you, that if you do the right thing, it starts from your house.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It's not somebody else will decide and do it and save the world. There's this saying, I mean, that's sorry to interrupt for that, but I like very much one thing that says, you hear a lot of people that say, oh, if I could go 10 years back in time and change things differently. And the best way to think of it is, well, think about what you can do today that will change something that will happen in 10 years. That's very important.
Absolutely, you're right to raise that, and I'm not going back to the story, but this is effectively something that is really frustrating, and I have seen it a lot in my neighborhood. I'm privileged. What I say around, I stop in the street and I collect fruit, and people look at me like if I was the thief for that. But fine, slowly and slowly, we will see how we can change things. Coming to the nature-based solutions, I mean, first of all, nature-based solutions start with the trees. And when you look around you, we cut easily the trees. If we have what happened in Volos, I mean, talk about Greece last year, last summer, and you have all this flooding, the things coming down, it partly, not exclusively, partly because all the building that we had up there and all the trees that were cut there. So this is the one thing. The other one is nature provide us with what we need to balance these emissions, and in order to make sure that we have the right soil and so on. You know, one of the, we have not discussed this at COP because I know that extremely sensitive and it's very difficult to discuss it about it, and science is very clear about it, is soil. The most important thing we have on earth is soil for agriculture. When you lose the 10 centimeter of soil, it takes hundreds of years to be reestablished. By losing the soil, we will go to make agriculture like in Amsterdam in the buildings and so on. We don't get all the nutrients we want and so on. And this is climate change. This is nature-based solution. Make sure that you have the right balance on your earth to feed you properly. And if you look at the religions, when I refer to this almost last slide, look at it. We see, we say no problem, we keep and so on. And if you go back to the generation, what our grandfathers and us were telling us is the best thing is to have a good land there and take care of it, and it will give you the future. We are all, you are Greek, I'm almost as Greek as you are. What the value of the land and the olive trees, and how much is it important in our history? And we're neglecting that. This is nature-based solution.
Absolutely.
And
yes,
we
Christina,
have one question from the audience on energy transition. So on energy transition, renewables and efficiency, there's a question regarding storing energy storage, and how this might have a detrimental effect on the environment due to the extraction of heavy metals. On the other hand, there's a lot of issues regarding energy storage, especially in Cyprus. There's a decrease in renewable energy output because there's no storage, and there's also a necessary minimum energy output on fossil fuels. So how do you address this contradiction?
Before Arab addresses the question, let me just add one point to this, because I think that's a very pertinent point. It was agreed in the COP28 the tripling of renewable energy, and this comes with limitations, because as the question from Cyprus is saying, one thing is storage, and there are technical issues with storage, but also pollution and so on issues. The other thing is that it's one thing to say that I will increase the installed capacity, so 3 times as many, I don't know, photovoltaics or wind power, but you need a grid that is in a position to absorb all this energy, because you have the fluctuation as well, you know, day, night, wind, no wind, and so on. So it's not as simple as that. And yeah, I think I just wanted to add this dimension that it's good to say that we'll do it, but we have to focus on really how we do it.
Yeah. Let me add to that. I mean, the issue of energy storage is not easy. It's challenging. We don't have the right solution today. There are possibilities for energy storage at small level, small communities, when you more or less what are the level of consumption without lot of fluctuation, exactly as Piers was saying it. But it doesn't mean that we will not be able to do it. But meanwhile, we can effectively, first of all, be more energy efficient. consume, I mean, do more and better with less. This is such a simple one on when it comes to energy. You know, people refer a lot to energy consumption, energy storage, but if we start, and I come back to the low-hanging fruit in the building sector, the energy issue, you know that each and every one of us, including me and probably you, we are just paying 1/4 of our bill by not stopping the electricity, the red lights, the not putting the window when we need, and 1/4 of it is paid just because we don't take the right actions.
Because we're lazy.
Yes, and imagine this for a building, for a city, for a country. And you can already save without technical changes, with just habits. I come back to the slide. With just responsible habits, you will save 1/3 of the energy for a country. Let us, not everybody will. Let us save 10%. You come back to the issue of storage, that you don't need to have it if you can effectively save it properly. But yes, the issue of storage is an extremely important issue. And it's currently, up to my understanding, from a technological point of view, not yet secure, because all these people who are making the solar panel in huge areas in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, in Morocco to feed Europe and so on, as well as in China, the concentration of this in a pillar, it's good for immediate transmission, but enough storage is not yet there. I mean, the problem is storage is the high level of storage we don't yet understand, and we don't know the consequences of it as of today. So let us be more energy efficient, responsible, before looking at the next. And I would like to add here, because I know that we might conclude yet. You saw the story is, it comes with the I want to compare with the cars. You can have an energy efficient car, the way you drive it, how clean is it, the type of fuel you will be using, or preferably not using it because you take public transport. Or you will say, oh, I'm now taking a hybrid car, I'm taking an electric car, but still adding the other car. So you have not changed your mindset. You are increasing the number of cars. You need still more roads. You need still more material, and you pretend you are getting greener. Because you have an electric car. So we're not just changing a problem with another. We're adding another problem, and that's what's happening with the energy issue. And this is an important issue for reporting when you want to measure the impact. Coming back to your own business.
Just a final point on the Q&A, that Yanis from Cyprus is saying what you mentioned, that Cyprus is energy isolated. And this is not an excuse. This is a part of the problem. Because if you manage to properly develop the grids in which energy is transmitted, then you solve a lot of the problems of not needing the storage. Because when somebody doesn't need the energy, somebody else does, and you can just channel it over there. I will not go on. I could discuss for you for hours, but I think that we're out of time. So I will give this one back now to Marina and Christina to conclude this session. I want, for my part, to thank you so much for sharing your insights. I always learn from you when we hear you speaking, and I hope I will keep on doing that for a long time. Thank you so much, Arab.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really nice listening to you. Really insightful. Christina?
Thank you all for being with us. Arab, our heartfelt thanks for sharing your insights or your experience. It shows, and hopefully our audience and our stakeholders who will be watching this again on YouTube will be taking as much pleasure and as much knowledge as we did today. Thank you again, and we will be having our next webinar on May 14th with a focus on tourism and sustainability. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.